Welcome to another conversation with Phil. Hey, if you probably figured this out, I'm Phil Grivishak. I'm delighted that you're here. In this show, we're going to talk to Gene Hammett. Gene is all about hypergrowth. He works with the Inc. 5000, not Fortune, wrong magazine there, to make hypergrowth happen. He's going to share his secrets, or at least a few of them that we can get in an hour. He's one of my buddies in the National Speaker Association. Now get this, Gene speaks internationally. He said this morning he talked to an Irishman from France, so that's interesting. Gene speaks internationally about becoming the choice, not a choice, the choice, and cultivating the entrepreneurial spirit to activate hypergrowth. He's also got a podcast, Leaders in the Trenches, that's been recognized by Inc., an entrepreneur for its insight on marketing and sales leadership. And I've been on an episode coming out soon. Gene is also the author of The Trap of Success, a brutally candid guide to overcoming your fears, finding significance, and achieving profound success. He's also a regular contributor to Inc. magazine and featured in Forbes, Success, Business Insider, and Entrepreneur. What's up today, Gene? It's good to see you, buddy.
It's good to be here, Phil.
Woohoo, man. So cool. So hypergrowth, brother. How do you define hypergrowth?
You know, I have worked in many companies. None of them had hypergrowth. I owned a company, and the very first year we went to $1 million in revenue, which is different than $1 million in profit. But the very first year, I was like, wow, my revenue is way up here, and my ability to lead people was way down here. It was like a firefighter every day. So I had to get really clear about some things, and this was almost 2 decades ago when that business was launching, and I had to learn how to lead people. I thought I knew coming from corporate America, but I just didn't know how to engage individuals and really connect with them. And my business ended up growing, doubling every year for 4 years. So that's a pretty good example of hypergrowth.
Holy crap, man. So doubled every 4 years due to leadership? Really? So then what, if that's hypergrowth, doubling every 4 years, totally agree. Whoop, whoop for that. What is leadership then, Gene?
So leadership is the ability to get people to see the vision for the future that you have seen for the business and to activate around that, even if it's not your particular goal, but you find alignment with others that they want to go with you. And leadership is having influence enough to get those people to want to do it. So you can't do it by dragging them. And you can't do it by just paying them a lot of money, because that runs out at some point in time.
Yeah. Wow. So you can't drag them. You can't just pay them a lot of money because they're going to leave. So Gene, let's just start, man. So what can you do? Give me one tactical tip that I can actually do, like right now with my team, to make the team perform better.
I'll give you the easiest thing I can do with you. If you have a big goal for them, and say, a customer service team, let's just use that as an example, and you want to take the level of service to a higher degree. Common goal, right? Say we want to, however you're measuring it. A lot of times you will, as a leader, will go in there and try to give them the steps that they should take. But if I'm going to ask leaders to step back and say, no, let's just talk about the goal and why the goal is so important, and how they could come up with ideas, because what you want them to do is to own the process. And when they own the process, they're going to own the goal. And that's what the core of all of the work I've done around hypergrowth is: leadership that actually creates a sense of ownership with the people. And this is what I call in this is just like, you want them to own that process. So don't do it for them. Let them create the process.
Awesome. So they create the process. Really important. So what about those leaders that don't buy in, man? You just fire them, or how do you get them fired up to actually participate in the fun?
The leaders don't buy in, or the employees?
Well, the employees don't. Let's start with them, right? Because we'll talk about leaders that don't buy in should be beat. Be really clear. But employees, though, how do we get? Because sometimes employees, they don't trust you, man. You're leading a company, and you're like, this is the first person that's ever actually even asked me, like, what color staples I want. much less anything else. So what if employees aren't buying in, man?
Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned something about, employees not trusting leaders. The Gallup poll recently came out with the workforce today, and 3 out of 10 employees across the world or across the United States don't believe the owners know what they're doing and the leaders know what they're doing.
Hold on. 3 out of 10 employees don't believe that leadership knows what it's doing.
Actually, only 3 in 10 believe that they do. So 7 in 10 believe that they don't.
Wow. So how is that possible, Gene? Before we even answer the previous question, how is that possible that people can believe that their leaders don't know what they're doing? Is that generational? What is that, man? That's crazy.
There is a generational component to it. There's and our younger employees. My wife is a millennial expert, so I borrow some of this from her research. Is they all think they know better. I have an 11-year-old who thinks he knows better than me, Phil.
Wow.
I mean, this is our younger generation, but I have also worked in those situations in corporate America where my boss wasn't on the front lines with me, wasn't truly, tuned in and aligned with what's really going on. And that's one reason why I called my podcast Leaders in the Trenches, because it's about being people in the front lines. But how has it happened? I mean, I'm not saying it's true, but that's the perception that employees are having right now with leadership. And that's just sad.
That's horrible, man. I mean, all right, we have to overcome that then. That's a big thing to overcome. So how do we overcome that? Like, I'm a leader, right? I've got a team, let's say, of people. How do I overcome that then, man? What's the baby step I can take to get me closer to winning over 7 of those lost team members?
It's not the baby step. I want to go back to my research, and we can talk about why I researched this, but I went to, I had 3 clients that made the Inc. 5000 last year. And the Inc. 5000 are the fastest growing companies over a 3-year period, privately held in America. And the average of the 51 companies I talked to grew at a pace of 2,700% over 3 years.
Holy balls.
And when I sat down with them, I asked them one question, and this one question changed everything for me. And it really allowed me to see what I actually did years ago in my own company, but I didn't have words for it yet. And the one question I asked them was, with your big goals, how do you get employees to take responsibility for your goals? Because fast-growing companies want to grow fast. They're engineered for that. The culture's around growth. And after 3 interviews, the conversation quickly told me that I was asking the wrong question, because the answer they kept coming back to me was, it's not about responsibility, it's about ownership. It's about getting them to own it. It's about them feeling like owners. And this different variations of this came back after all these interviews, and then everything after that was just spot on. Like, they're all just like, oh, yep, absolutely. It's about ownership, ownership, ownership. And so the big idea, I think leaders have to, understand if they want to engage their teams, is how can I lead them so that they feel like they're an owner, even if they don't have a piece of the pie, or I'm not paying them a commission on this deal. And that's the key.
Okay. Wow. So many, many, many years ago, like my first real corporate job, I worked at a place called Strong Investments. And Dick Strong made it really clear that the one thing that we all needed to do was to think like an owner. What would you do if you owned this place? That meant picking up after yourself. That meant making sure that your desk was tidy at the end of the day. That meant turning off lights in rooms that weren't being used. That meant no unnecessary meetings. So is it as simple as saying, hey, think like an owner, and then empowering your team, or what?
Well, it's simple, but it's not easy. We hear that all the time. And that's one reason why I took the research I had, and I felt like the speech that came out of it, it's almost too practical and actionable, if that's possible. I know.
Hold on. Too practical and okay, come on.
Well, because I want to give them everything I can, and I want them to make it seem like they can do it, but it is much harder than what people are actually doing, because let's be honest, not many people are doing this. Otherwise, we'd have more of these companies growing into the Inc. 5000, because there's a lot of companies that didn't make that list. So, I created the 6 disciplines of hypergrowth companies. And, one of those aspects is about the process, not telling them how to do their job, letting them take ownership of the process. And so they're able to see opportunities for innovation and breakthrough. They're coming up with ideas themselves. And there's a whole bunch of these things that we could go through, but you've got to, first step is, can I lead people, and do we want to lead people to feel like owners? You just showed a good example. I mean, those are very good practical things of turn up the lights. Everything should be run that way. Like when you hand someone, like, I don't know if you have any conferences, if you had an assistant and you said, go get lunch for 20 of us today, they should spend money like it's their money, not like it's you've just given them Amex Black Card. Right?
Yeah. I mean, then it seems really obvious, right? That they should, but many don't. Is that wrong person or wrong equipped or what?
It's about expectations. It's about creating the leadership that really makes people feel like their ideas are heard. So another one of the disciplines is it's really about ideas. It's about knowing that anyone in the organization can have a good idea. There's too many leaders sitting in a closed room where it's just the executive team making all the decisions for a company. You've probably been there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Been on the inside. You've probably also had time where you were on the outside of that meeting.
Yep, absolutely.
And as you do that, if that's the way the culture is built, it's hard to take ownership of ideas that you're not a part of. And if you don't have the kind of culture that allows the best ideas to come through, it really will dampen your ability to grow at a speed that you're capable of. You don't have to have an Ivy League education to have the best idea. You don't have to have 20 years of service. You just have to have a good idea, and people have to be willing to go, what if we did do that? Where this really shines through, and we're both men, and I wasn't as aware to this, but I've heard a lot of women talk about how they can have an idea in a room and many people will dismiss that idea. 5 minutes later, some guy will say something very similar and people will rally around it like it's the best thing they've ever heard. If that's our leadership, you're basically telling that woman that, yeah, your idea doesn't mean anything and you don't mean anything. And I think that we need to treat people with diversity and of thought. And that's what this whole concept I speak about and work with teams on is how do we get them to feel like owners?
Yeah. Wow. Certainly I've seen that in action. Sadly, yeah. When I had a corporate job, I certainly saw that in action. My boss would get minimized by a senior leader all the time in meetings where they would just ignore her and then steal the idea 3 to 5 minutes later for sure. But I've also seen organizations on the other side that doesn't happen, that ideas do come from anywhere, and certainly leads to way more ideas, because if you can take it from the intern and you can take it from not to minimize women, but from a woman, from a person of color, from someone of a different sexual persuasion, you can take it from anywhere. If you can do that, you can actually move an organization forward. So it sounds to me like it's about ownership from for the employees, but then about culture building and consistent behavior from the leaders. Is that right, Gene?
Well, culture is always going to shift with consistent behavior. I'm in the midst of training a puppy right now, Phil. I don't know. I haven't done this really ever. I have a 4.5-month-old German Shepherd rescue. So as my wife says, don't shop adopt.
There you go.
So we adopted a German Shepherd, and I know he's going to be a big dog. And, so we're getting a trainer come to the house. And is he training the dog or is he training me? The reality is he's mostly training both of us, right? And I said, what's the number one thing that gets this to work? Because I want him to be a really obedient dog. I don't want him jumping on people. I want him to sit at the door. I want him to heel. He's like this big right now, and he'll heel right beside me. It's beautiful. He goes, the most important thing is consistency. So if we go back to that answer about culture and the best ideas coming out, how are you consistently hearing other people's ideas? Are the right people in the room, or you just have the executive team? Every one of these companies, or nearly every one of the companies that were, doing something big and casting vision for the future, they were casting vision, but then they would go back to the team as a core process, very practical. They would go back to the team and say, "Hey, this is where we're going. We want your feedback on this. This is still in a straw man phase. We want your ability to shape this with us, because the people who create the vision have more ownership in the vision itself."
Yeah.
But
of course,
if you block off and you only let 4 people at the top do it, and everyone else is told they're going to get on board, you're minimizing the chance of ownership there.
That's interesting.
So it is about culture.
Yeah. So that totally changes the conversation from the sage on the stage, if you will, right? The single brilliant person at the top that spews all the great ideas, down to a much more foundational organization where it's flatter and offers more insight, at least flatter idea wise, maybe not flatter structural wise, which, I mean, is that why, like, let's use an older example, right? Is that why Zappos grew like they did at his holacracy there, or was there something else at play?
So Zappos, they did a lot of things right. I know that they didn't do everything right in the beginning, and they're probably still learning some things. But one of the things as it relates to the sense of ownership is they have a real core mission. And it was around customer service. It was around wow customer service. And what that does as it relates to ownership is everyone was able to get involved with how do we serve these customers to wow them? And how can we, they're continuously doing that, not because of, some metric that they're trying to hit, but just because of a sense of ownership. Everyone's coming together and say, if that's our core mission, how do we do it? And, part of the whole concept of ownership is people get really proud out of a company that is being recognized for taking care of employees. They're being recognized for how they're, pay people to leave. And all of these stories we hear about Zappos, it really does help when others are involved with the execution of those missions and having a mission to begin with. People love to work with a one-of-a-kind company. There's not another company out there like Zappos, right?
Yeah,
they're the top of the tier. And so there's more ownership, pride of ownership, being an employee inside that world.
So that's hypergrowth inside the Inc. 5000. But then, I've got a few organizations that I know of that were in the list that then went, bigger, kind of graduated up, if you will, from Inc. to Fortune or, one of the other lists. And then they change. It's like what got them there. Like they decide that they're going to change all these things. And then, employees become disenfranchised with the vision change. So I'm curious, Gene, why do you think that is? Why do organizations change when they think that?
It is harder to maintain culture as you're growing fast and as you're growing big. As you have many workers that are not in the same offices, it's harder. It's still possible, but it also you lose fact of what's most important. And this is what happens to a lot of companies. When you get to be bigger, when you become a publicly traded company, so to speak, you have a fiduciary responsibility to produce each quarter. Those short-term focus, and we've all been through this, we've all seen it, the short-term focus makes you lose focus of the long-term, and you lose focus of the people because it becomes more about the numbers than about the people. I just wrote an article, it just published, I think today for Inc. It was really about the performance. A lot of people have a performance-based culture, which is about win and lose. And if you are always in a, did we hit the numbers? Did we hit the numbers? Did we hit the numbers? Yes, we did. It's great. But if we didn't, everyone's deflated. But if you have a growth culture, it's not about the specific number you're hitting. It's at how are we building momentum for this as we go. And it's more long-term growth, and it's more personal growth than, and all the employees, than it is about the company hitting the numbers.
Okay. That's interesting. And I like that. And I'm curious though, how does that play to a sales team, Gene? I mean, sales folks are focused month, quarter, half year. I mean, that growth is great, but how does that work if you're a sales team and you don't hit your number?
So I've spoken at AAISP, just like you have.
Yep.
They're inside sales groups. And when I talk to them about these issues, numbers are still going to be a play in any culture, any business. But is it front and center? Is it more important to hit the numbers, or is it more important for the people to feel understood and appreciated and growing and building momentum? I think hypergrowth companies would rather focus on the people and the employees of that than actually worrying about the numbers. They know that once they get the people right and the retention goes up and people are get their skill levels going up, we'll talk about their mindset in a minute, but when people are transforming inside the company, the numbers are easy. But if you just focus on the numbers becomes, well, how many calls did you make today? How many conversations did you have? How many meetings did you set up? We get those. I've been in that situation. I'm sure you have too. And sometimes I'm still there for myself. But are you getting better at this? Are you moving the needle? Are you building momentum within this? That's a more important factor than did you hit the number today?
Growth as it relates to getting closer and closer to the number, getting closer and closer to our big goal is really what matters. I mean, that's empowering, that's inspiring, and that gets people going to work. But knowing, oh crap, I'm going to get the poop beat out of me today because I'm not on track for quota is a really hard thing. Yeah.
I don't want to go to the sales meeting today because I didn't hit it last week.
Yeah.
There is, you gotta really ask yourself, are we a performance-based culture or are we a growth culture? Which is better for us? Things change over time. I think that most companies, based on the Inc. 5000 and the work I'm doing, because now I started out with 51 companies, now it's over 100, and I'm about to go deep into this again of really figuring out what's going on, and the sales component of it is always going to be important. Everybody wants to know that they're growing. You always ask practical and actual, and I told you my speech is so practical. Here's another one for you. In sales, we always have company goals and we have team goals. Those get talked about like side by side, right? Where do we talk about the personal individual goals? Where do we talk about how that person as a sales rep wants to grow in the organization? Are they on a path to just be a top sales performer? Or are they on a path to be the best sales manager? Or are they ready to move into some other area because that's where their natural skill set really, they want to shine? Are you having those career planning conversations with the individual employees so that you figure out how they want to grow, and then you figure out what I call an alignment process, the actual growth that they have as an individual person, how does it align with the team and the company? If you find that, As a leader, if you find that every day, you don't have to drag that person in to get the work done. They show up not because they're supposed to, it's because they want to. That's ownership.
Yeah. Well, what do we do though? Sometimes those don't align, Gene. I mean, I managed teams before, and I would have people that would completely outside of anything that could be considered a linear path that made no sense at all. And they had, I mean, truly the only way they could get the experience they needed to get to the level they wanted to was to leave the organization and come back, which nobody wanted to do, frankly, because we had a fantastic culture and we paid people, fairly. And we did have pride of ownership. But sometimes, hey, I want to go off and be a doctor. I want to go off and, be a veterinarian, or I want to go off and be a librarian. I mean, those don't align with a financial services organization's culture. So what do we do about that, man? If they're still performing at a big level, how do we get them to own that when, frankly, their ownership is tenuous at best?
So my mind goes to two parts of this. Like, there are some people that aren't a fit for the role, even if it's even if they're paying the bills, right? Even if they're getting benefits for the family and they really need them. So, if they really are wanting to follow another path, like to go from financial services to be doctor, like, it's hard to find that alignment. I'm not saying it's impossible, because there could be. This provides the flexibility and the income and the benefits that make all that possible. And if you lose this, where are you going to find it somewhere else? And they come in with that sense of ownership. Now, the other side is really part two would be, thinking creatively around this. Like, could we use that skill here? Or what are the skills that you can develop that will help you when you get there to be a better doctor? And as they identify those skills and you find a place for them to fit, they begin to know that they're making stride toward the big goal. And that alignment right there is sometimes the best you can do. But most of the time, it's not quite like that. It's more or less just listening to the person. Most of the time, it's just, oh, you want to learn how to write? Great. Why don't we get you involved in some of the projects? You've had this experience here. Why don't you work, a little bit of your time on these projects and see if how that works out. And if they've got skills for it, I mean, we've heard the stories over and over and over. There's been someone who's brought into one role and they've had a better skill set for something else, even if they had no formal education. They just had a knack for it and a new perspective, and then they shine like a rock star. Like, that's real ownership too. So I just want to make sure does that answer the question?
Absolutely. No, definitely. And that's about aligning a skill with the goal and the person's desires with the goal, even if it's not the perfect job for the goal. And I think that's really strong suggestion, Gene. I really like that. And that makes a ton of sense. So, So let's shift gears here. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast because I think it's instructive. You have an interesting podcast. Leaders in the Trenches is not like a lot of the podcasts that I listen to in a good way, because it's some interviews and some solo casts. So how do you determine like what goes on the solo cast, what goes on an interview? I mean, do you have like things that you just got to get out of you, or where does that fly? Because I'm relaunching kind of the audio only portion of mine next month. And I'm like, I kind of like the way Gene does this, and maybe I'm going to do this too. So talk to me about that, please.
So I'm going to go back to why this happened. After 3 years, my podcast was not growing. I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, I was getting good feedback. It was mostly interviews, because it's a lot easier to do an interview than it is to prepare for a solo show. And the solo shows I was doing was almost like preparing for a new speech. And what level of work that takes. I don't script everything out there, but 20 minutes of a solo is what I was doing is hard. And so I stopped doing it. Well, my team actually, when we were looking at this is where good ideas, when you allow the best ideas to come through, and it wasn't my idea. someone on my team, Tiffany, said, you stop doing solo shows. A, you're not getting your point of view out into the marketplace, and B, you're just highlighting other people as interviews, which I love to do interviews. I feel like I'm growing through these interviews. And I said, you're right. You're absolutely right. It took me a while to figure out what I was going to do about it, because I had in my mind I needed to do another 20-minute show. And everything's moving towards shorter. So I said, what could I deliver in 4 to 5 minutes? I thought a minute was crazy, because I don't think we could really uncover a problem and really get into it, or maybe even tell a story in 1 minute. But we could tell a great story in 3 minutes and wrap it around this with something to do from it. And that's what I challenged myself to do. And I started doing that in April. And we added the new show in April. And since April to now August, we have gone from, I think it's like 150% increase.
Awesome. That's
awesome. Additional to that, what we're doing is audiograms, and we're taking snippets from the show. So Phil, when you were on the show, my team will go in, they'll take something smart that you said, and we'll put that to Instagram and to LinkedIn, and we'll put that into to Twitter and to Facebook. We'll actually do a little bit of paid promotion on that, because it just makes sense. Not spending a whole lot, but we're doing paid promotion to get people to keep coming back to the show. And that is what's growing the show. And, to get our message, get my message out there, to be able to take, I think you asked the question was, how do I determine, what I'm going to talk about or whatnot for solo? It really just comes from a conversation with a client. I am real careful not to break confidentiality, because not every client is comfortable with their problems being discussed. But I will say, you know what, that was a really interesting question about how that pertains to leadership and growth. I'm going to set that up as a story and tell the story and give you the insight that you need. And that's going to be an episode. And can I do that in 5 minutes? Done. Awesome.
That's terrific. I'm really trying to get my videos on LinkedIn under 2 minutes. That's my goal. And that is kind of setting up where I'm going to do 2 minutes with Phil on the podcast now and then, where I'm going to go tight too. So tell Tiffany I said thank you as well, because that's definitely something I'm going to do, Gene.
Well, I'm taking a different approach. Like, I could do it in 2 minutes, but one of my favorite Mark Twain quotes is, I would have written you a short letter, but I didn't have time, so I wrote you a long one instead. And go from 5 minutes to 2 minutes doesn't sound like much, but you got to be right on word choice. You got to be right on, which is very important now for people's attention. So I've challenged myself to do this in 4 to 5 minutes. Some of them have gone over. Some of them have been 3-ish. But what we're doing is taking the best pieces out of that and putting them into LinkedIn. And then there's a call to action at the end that says, hey, if you want to know that the rest of this, make sure you check out the full episode. It's only 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then they'll go into it. And so that's driving a lot of growth to the brand. And it's really giving me a chance to get my message out there, my point of view. And I'm getting a lot more feedback from the market on what they appreciate. And I'm looking at analytics, because I'm still a numbers person. I'm looking at the numbers. The solo shows, the smaller shows, are getting a 15% higher play rate than the interviews.
Wow.
So
okay, well, I'll play around, Gene. That's good. I appreciate that. Thanks for being transparent there. So So all right. So lots of cool stuff. So who are you hoping is gonna, who would you like on your show that you haven't yet had?
I'm going to tell you right now, there's one person that I really want bad. There's some other people I want in the show. So I've kind of got I'm swinging for the fences here. I had Seth Godin a few weeks ago. I got Frank Blake, who's the former CEO of Home Depot. That was a really big win, because part of my whole ownership message is about the entrepreneur spirit inside the company. And one of the core values for a company like Home Depot with 350,000 employees is entrepreneur spirit. is very important to them. So the current guest, to answer your question very, very, very on point, is Sarah Blakely.
Nice, from Spanx.
Spanx. So Sarah is amazing. I know Jesse, her husband. He's a remarkable person himself, but Sarah is so amazing. And I heard her talking the other day on this Q&A format, and her husband asked her a question, and I'll share it with you. Do you want me to share it with you?
Please do.
Okay. So the question was, with your amazing success, multiple billion-dollar company, billion-dollar value, net worth and whatnot, what are your struggles right now? And she came back and said, self-worth.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I had the same reaction. Men and women think differently about self-worth. And even with the success she has, and even with everything she's done, she's like, there's times in my day where I need to take time for myself to ground myself and go back and remind myself of the value that I've created and that I am worth it.
Wow.
And she talked about how to do that. So I want to be able to get that on the interview. I want to write about it for Inc. And I'm excited to be able to help, I think, people in general, but even women that are so smart and so brilliant that they're afraid to put themselves out there. And so I think that would be a great interview for the show.
Awesome. So if anybody listening or watching knows Sarah Blakely from Spanx, connect her to Gene. Tag her below, let her know, send it to her. We'd love to help Gene make that come true.
That would be awesome, because I'm in connections with doing this. I'm playing it slow, as most relationships are best played with a little bit of a simmer, instead of being a bull in a china shop. And so I'm planning on doing this over the next few weeks. So if anyone's going to do it, let's do it quick, because I'm going to do it myself.
Awesome. That's great, man. Well, cool. So, all right, Gene. So as we wrap this up, buddy, what's one thing today that maybe is completely out of the box that you would give someone for some advice that you haven't already mentioned so far?
What's one thing I would give them advice?
Yeah.
This is my next article that I'm writing for Inc. And hasn't published yet. It's still kind of in a shaping place. I don't even have a working title for it yet, but it's around transformational leadership. I see a lot of leaders willing to invest in themselves for coaching, for programs, conferences, retreats, all that stuff. And I love that, because that means they're spending money with me and friends and whatnot. They're spending money with you, Phil. That is fantastic. But could those leaders be looking at how do they transform the minds of the people that are following them, the leaders that they're creating? How do they get them to see the world with self-worth in mind? Remove the fear, remove the doubt. Because transformational leadership is not about the transformation of the leader. It's about the transformation of the people that are able to see the world from a different perspective. And so, I'm kind of on a mission. I mean, maybe I should have started out with this, and it's crazy that I have this mission, but I have a mission that everyone loves Mondays. I'm an entrepreneur. Phil, you're an entrepreneur. I love Mondays, but not everybody feels the same. But what if they were so engaged with their work, they knew they were growing and contributing to the world, they would love Mondays as much as we do. So that's what I think our leaders should be thinking about, the transformational aspects of the people that are inside the company and how they could see the world differently.
Awesome. So Gene's on a mission to make everyone love Mondays. Folks, believe it or not, it's Monday when we're talking at live. Whenever you watch this, love the day that you're with, but especially love Mondays. Just a little more for my buddy Gene Hammett. So, Gene, I'm so delighted that you're here with me, man. Your podcast is awesome, Leaders in the Trenches. My episode has not come out yet, so that is not some shameless shill. I actually I enjoy the podcast a lot. Your articles always offer me some insight, and you're just a delightful guy. So thanks for being here, Gene. I so appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
For sure. So, okay, folks. So your goal is to find a way to build a culture, either for yourself, for your team, for your company, that encourages ownership, that encourages folks to love Mondays and to think like an owner, to transform from slow growth or performance-based into hyper growth, like my friend Gene Hammett. If you want to learn more about Gene, go to genehammett.com. That's GeneHammett.com. Check Gene out. And until next time, have an awesome day. We'll see you soon. Enjoy. See ya. And always the uncomfortable ending here because